Welcome to the Marketecture Podcast. I'm Ari Paparo. I'm joined by Eric Franchi, and our guest this week is Ron Jacobson from Rockerbox. We asked Ron on the show following last week's announcement of Google's MMM tool, Meridian, and just generally things being really interesting and in flux in the measurement area. Eric, do you do a lot of measurement? You're excited to hear from Ron?
Yeah, I mean, measurement is one of the big stories of the year. I think number one. We have a couple of measurement companies in the portfolio, so it's an area we have a thesis on. And like Ron is the person that I think about when I think about measurement. He's got such a great purview, just being the CEO of Rockerbox, and his clients are actually a little bit different than the ad tech ecosystem. They tend to skew towards walled gardens and other forms of media. So I think he brings good, fresh thinking around the topic.
Yeah, he's our measurement guy. We got a guy for everything nowadays.
I didn't want to say that, but he kind of is.
Yeah. Also, speaking of which, a lot of funding news. So your portfolio company, TVScientific, raised a big B round with Roku, and StackAdapt raised a fairly huge $235 million round, which was kind of eye-opening.
We're going to spend a lot of time on that one. That shook AdTech X right up. It was highly controversial.
So Marketecture also publishes the AdTech God podcast. You should listen because AdTech God had the CEO of StackAdapt on as a sort of emergency pod yesterday. I think he's the only podcast that had StackAdapt's firsthand account of their funding. So check
good.
that out. Yeah, I know. He's like AdTech God's becoming like a little journalist. So good for him. And another reminder that he is not me or Eric. He's a different human being. He works for me. I know who he is. I sign his paychecks. He's a real human being. Works for me, not me.
He's also not little. Don't throw people off and thinking there's like a small person they're going to look for at the Marketecture conference.
He's huge. And last, we'd be remiss if we didn't give a plug for Marketecture Live. So the Marketecture Live event is coming up in March 17th. We're adding new guests every week. This week, we announced that Alex Sherman, the CEO of Bluefish, will be on with Eric Lanuti from Omnicom. And what they're going to be talking about is the future of AI for brands. So if consumers aren't using search to find things, how are you going to search engine optimize? You're not. You're going to use something different. So Bluefish is one of the companies that's really innovating in that space. There are a bunch of other ones. So he will be at our conference talking about that, among many other really great conversations. So go to marketecturelive.com to register now before tickets sell out. All right, let's get into it. We will be back with Ron. All right, Ron Jacobson from Rockerbox. Thanks for being on.
Hey, glad to be here.
So this is your first appearance on the podcast, right? We had you on the vendor interview, right?
No, it's not second.
Oh, we've had you on both the vendor interview and the podcast. Wow.
I'm glad I'm so memorable.
If you remember that, Ari, if you remember that he was on before, would you have invited him back for today's episode? Or
it's a good question. We have to dole out the repeat visits very carefully, or else it'll get stale.
I advocate that with so much going on in measurement right now, Ron deserves the repeat.
Yeah, Ron better give us some incremental insights on this pod, or else it'll just be repeat. All right, so Ron. No, we wanted to have you on in all seriousness because measurement is a very hot topic. There's a lot going on with, in particular, media mix modeling, which I know is not exactly what you do for a living, but is very related. So why don't you just start by giving us the state? What in 2025, what is the state of advertising measurement and what's going on?
So there are three main things that are going on in measurement today. There is like a battle over methodologies. How are you doing your measurement? Is it media mix modeling? Is it incrementality testing? Is it MTA? So that's kind of topic number one. Topic number two is how do you actually use these different methodologies? I think this is like a really big problem. It's a lot of folks just like go and suddenly say, I'm using media mix modeling, but they have no idea how to operationalize it. So kind of what's the system day to day to leveraging measurement? And the third one, and this is just started to get some legs, I think middle of last year, but it's going to heat up in 25. It's feeding back attribution results into ad buying platforms to optimize against. So those are the three main areas. It's again, which methodology, how do you actually use the data, and how do you make sure your platforms are optimizing against your source of truth.
So on the methodology, do you have to choose one? Are they either or?
I mean, they aren't. I think they all bring different things to the table. I think a lot of advertisers, and my purview is generally advertising facing. At Rockerbox anyway, we work primarily with brands. So that's where we kind of get most of our information from. I think a lot of brands often are going for whatever the hottest measurement methodologies of the minute. And you're right, MMM has been very hot in the last year. Incrementality testing has also been really hot in the last year. Having said that, like it's almost been like a sine wave over the course of the past 5 years over when they're hot, when they're cold, when they're hot, when they're cold. Incrementality testing had a really hot period like 4 or 5 years ago.
Right.
Cold for 2 years, is hot again now. MMM, I actually think was hotter in 23 than it was in 24. It ebbs and flows. I think a lot of advertisers just kind of run towards whatever is being talked about in the moment. And then the problem is they often have no idea what they're actually trying to get out of it. I think like the classic example here is I had a client come to me talking about media mix modeling. And when we asked them, why do they want it? They said to understand the path to conversion. And like that is complete opposite
right.
what MMM does. But I think that speaks a lot to just there's a lack of information on what these different methodologies do. So to your exact question, no, you don't need to be forced into using one. But that kind of comes into the system problem. Like if you're using multiple methodologies, how do you actually make decisions? And that becomes really complicated. And you hear words like triangulation thrown around, which I have strong opinions about, but it's difficult to make use of these different methodologies in a practical way.
Well, right, incrementality, let's tackle that one first. So that was really hot, I know, like 5-6 years ago when people were talking about ghost bidding, where you'd have like some users who were not exposed to the ads. And my understanding is that ghost bidding really fell out of favor with cookie deprecation, because if you can't identify the user, you can't create a holdout group. Has that changed?
No, ghost bidding is, you're completely right there. I'd say the hot current moment of testing is geo-based tests.
Right.
So testing control, figuring out statistically similar geographies, and either doing a holdout test or a scale-up test. So that's kind of replaced the user-based version of ghost bidding. And that's very popular now. It can be really, really effective. There are pros and cons against it. Cons are it takes time. Actually has a revenue impact because you're like potentially not serving in an area. But it's considered like the gold standard of measurement in the sense of the most accurate way to actually gauge what's happening with your marketing.
And when you think about like incrementality testing versus, say, media mix modeling, aren't you also thinking about different sort of timeframes of decision making? You need to make decisions on, what to change in the meta UI and how to change how you're targeting whitelists and blacklists and trade desk. That's very short term. Whereas there are other decisions you're making on an annual basis, a budgeting basis.
Yeah, and I think this is a huge part of the problem is that advertisers come and they want MMM or testing, and they don't think about what am I going to do on Monday when I get to work, and Wednesday when I need to make changes. And neither of those methodologies can actually tackle that challenge. There's some companies out there that claim that they can do like daily MMM and things like that. I think it's all BS. And honestly, I think it's even just like trying to solve the wrong problem, to be frank. And that's where, at least the way that I view the world is, you need kind of your day-to-day hub of measurement. I think that has to be either like a Google Analytics type of day-to-day attribution. That could be app platforms themselves, their self-reported data. We can talk about the pros and cons there. It could be a Rockerbox type thing with our sort of like MTA type products. But that's like your day-to-day hub of measurement. I think then you want to, what ends up coming from there is you see things that seem off. So it's just like CTV seems off, or can I scale into this channel? You have these sort of questions that you want to validate. And that's actually where I think MMM and testing can be really good validation frameworks to validate what you see from that day-to-day source of information. But again, that's based off historical information. So it'll take some time for you to get that answer to validate. And then eventually, once you get those responses, we see clients then calibrating it back to their daily data with some sort of multiplier.
Yeah, like one example would be if you're using a sort of a vanity style metric, like a view through in an open web, and that may justify spending more money, but then on a quarterly basis, you run your MMMs and it's like, well, that's actually just not driving actual cash registers.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I also think once you get to MMM, it's a broader type of measurement, right? It takes into account things that you just couldn't do on a daily basis. It takes into account competitors and brand search and inflation and like all these exogenous variables. So like it fundamentally answers a different problem on a different cadence. So I think that's where, as a brand, you need to figure out what's that day-to-day kind of pulse of your business. And then how do you make those quarterly, biannual, annual decisions that MMM and incrementality testing can be really helpful in doing. But if you run your business exclusively off MMM, it's kind of hard to make a decision on any given day. What the hell should I do?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, California is west of New York, but not clear how to get there. So why is MMM so hot right now? And we want to, secondarily, we're going to talk about Google and Meta's investments here.
I think a lot of the reason it's hot is because of their investments. I mean, you have the biggest ad platforms in the world, open sourcing, Meridian with Google, Robin with Meta. So obviously the weight that they bring to the industry is huge. I had this thing called Lightweight that was a market for a while. It was like pseudo associated with Google. It's kind of like one of those 20% projects. It definitely like leveled it up and polished it with Meridian and made it a bit more sophisticated. But I think by and large, it's that. I mean, when you have Google and Meta in market with open source MMM libraries, there's obviously going to be interest there. I think there's the question asked, like, why? Why are they so?
Yeah, why?
I mean, this is my hypothesis, at least on the Google side, is MMM is ostensibly better at measuring more upper funnel channels. And I think a really important upper funnel channel that Google has a lot of ownership and stake in is YouTube. So I think that if you look at long-term trends, who knows where search is going, with especially like Gen AI and things like that. I think having a methodology market that better suits themselves for upper market is going to be helpful. And also, I mean, there is the whole whatever happens with cookies and with the Google opt-out. So I think they need to hedge as well and just have different methodologies that they feel confident in and likely make themselves look good.
Ron, do you see clients like using these open source tools? Do you see, it seems like with the Google announcement, there's a partner program where a lot of like specialist agencies are going to be using these and presumably kind of creating products for clients. And what does it mean for the ecosystem of companies that just do this as a business?
It's actually a pretty interesting parallel, I think, in like the open source versus closed source and media mix modeling to kind of like where AI is going. I actually think any company that's trying to have closed source MMM is going to be in a really tough position. Like it's just going to be very hard to keep up with Google, with Meta. There's this other company, PyMC, that's like a pseudo open source MMM company and a consultancy layer on top of that. They all have lots of contributors and they're able to advance really rapidly. So I think it's a tough position to be in if you're trying to build proprietary MMM models these days, to be frank. In terms of do we see clients leveraging them, the short answer is yes. Like I've seen, I'm going to say all, I'm being glib there, but like almost everybody has like dipped their toe into trying one of the open source models. The problem arises with what do you do after you do the first build? And that's, I think, where you start to realize the model is in a way the commodity. The actual business value is everything before the model's made and after the model's made. It's funny. It's the same problem that MMM has had for probably 10, 15, 20 years. It's how do I centralize all the data? How do I get it clean? How do I get it normalized? How do I do this in a repeatable cadence, which is surprisingly hard, especially if you're a global company with multiple agencies across the world and different logins to Meta in the US and the UK and having to aggregate that data. It just becomes a hard challenge in that regard. The second problem is, cool, I built my MMM model, now what? And is this really going to be something that gives enough confidence to our business to make fundamental changes in how we allocate our media spend? I think that there's apprehension when there's a one-off model that's been made with an open source tool that's kind of like a side project of the data scientists in the company to actually make large-scale business changes on top of that. And that's, to your point, where I think the consultancies or Rockerbox and some of my competitors obviously have a role to play in the sense of like, hey, this is the model. Here's how you actually action on it from a budget perspective, from a day-to-day perspective.
Other than just directionally. And I just have to presume that Google and Meta believe the outputs of good MMM modeling will be beneficial to them, which is a little shocking because of how much of the advertising market they currently absorb. They actually, you can infer that their belief is that they're not getting their fair share if you were modeling. Do you think that's their point of view?
I do, and I think there are two ways to kind of see that. One is if you look at it from like a day-to-day attribution perspective, MTA, you can't really get views through data from YouTube into that. So YouTube is underrepresented in third-party attribution or MTA. So that's one negative.
Right.
The second part is if you look at Meridian, actually one of the key things they launched in it was a data set around Google's, I forget exactly what they call it. I think it's like their search query volume, where they made a data set public, an API public, where you can get really granular impression levels and search levels against given queries. And you can funnel that into Meridian. So I think that they actually believe that that's going to make their MMM even better for search as well. So in a way, they're trying to make MMM that I think helps them out on both the search side and on the YouTube side. I think less so on the search side, but definitely on the YouTube side, they're underrepresented from deduplicated attribution.
Right, that makes sense because MTA models would require impression level data or logs, and
which they don't make available.
Right. Well, do people use Ads Data Hub for that?
Some do. I mean, we've explored it ourselves. It's something I'm not against doing at some point, but it's a mixed bag, to be honest with you. Yeah.
So in general, off of MMM, but onto just general measurement, have we permanently entered the world where we're not looking at actual deterministic data and we're only going to be looking at statistical or correlations for measurement?
No, I don't think so at all. I think that everything we look at will have a statistical or correlation part on top of it. But I think there will, and there is still deterministic aspects that are kind of the foundation. I'll say what I mean there. Post iOS 14.5, I actually think, it was done for privacy's sake, but it's actually led to a lot of platforms being more open to sharing some deterministic data with third-party measurement providers. And Rockerbox has been in market with this, with partnerships with like Reddit and Pinterest and Snapchat, to name a few, where we are now working with them and getting deterministic view-through data. And others are doing this as well. So I think this is a trend that kind of came out of iOS 14.5. So in a way, I think we're actually getting higher fidelity data. And I think a lot of advertisers are doing a much better job at capturing first-party data. And I'd recommend all advertisers do that. Where I'm saying that there is a probabilistic component is once you get that deterministic measurement, there's then extrapolation being done on top of that. Extrapolations try to compensate for opt-out rates, match rates. And this is even done in Google and Meta's attribution. They do, I think they call it modeled conversions. So they even themselves in their deterministic attribution add a probabilistic component on top of it.
Right.
So I think there definitely is still a basis of deterministic data, but it's going to be layered on top of with some sort of probabilistic measurement.
So in a fragmented environment, I'm sort of giving you a softball for your company here, but in a fragment, if you're a CMO and you're buying on 20 different digital channels and they all don't cooperate with one another, what's the marketer to do?
Candidly, I think you need a day-to-day source of measurement. I think that should be some sort of attribution, MTA. I think Rockerbox is great, obviously, but there are other companies out there. And I do think over time, you're going to want to validate that with mean-mix modeling and incrementality testing and bring those results back to your day-to-day measurement. I actually think in a way, like if you have that sort of system in place and you know what you do every single day, every quarter, every half year, you could be really effective. I think when you're in a bad position is if you kind of take this term triangulation, which is this broad term that you're going to hear thrown a lot in measurement, which basically says pick whichever type of measurement you want and start there. Just use the other ones whenever you kind of feel like it to kind of validate. And the problem there is like there's no system. It's just kind of like you get one number and you get another number and you're going to just like, I've never heard anybody be able to define what triangulation actually means, even though it sounds really smart. So that's what I would not do. I would not focus on triangulation. I'd focus on just the non-sexy thing. Have something you can go in every single Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, see how your business is performing, have a method to check it and refine it based off what those checks actually report out.
Yeah, what I've heard about triangulation, I think, is that every once in a while you do like a very definitive test. Like, for example, I once worked with a client that just turned off YouTube for 2 weeks entirely to just see what happened. So you do this you do a test like that once every couple of years, and that gives you some data points you really believe in, and then you kind of use that as a rule of thumb for day-to-day work, which is less deterministic.
I think that is close to what people will say about it. I go then, but that day-to-day requires something. So what is that day-to-day method you're using? And that's where people often will say you can just start your measurement journey with just like holdout tests, which is true. You can get some information about that, but like after that test is over and a quarter has gone by, you still need that day-to-day data. And it's almost like with this triangulation methodology, it's almost as if you can start measurement without having someone use on a daily basis. And I think that's just wrong in my opinion.
What's the role of Chrome's privacy sandbox, their measurement APIs in this? Have you tested them? Are you counting on them? Do you think they're real?
I've not tested them. I don't know anybody who really has from a measurement perspective. I know companies that purport to be, they are, I'm not going to purport, that are more privacy-focused measurement companies, like Anonym, I think that was bought by Mozilla. Even they are more in terms of privacy-enhancing technologies. We set up servers that have all of the privacy compliance regulations, auto regulations. So even they are more in terms of what's a clean room oriented than I think leveraging one of the APIs like privacy sandbox.
Is that because you don't believe in the browser doing it, or because you just haven't prioritized spending time with it?
So it's more the latter. And for me, I'm the weird one here where open web programmatic is actually surprisingly not important for my clients. The biggest weakness of the core attribution I talk about is that third-party cookies are the only way, by and large, to measure open web view-through, outside of using one of the user identifiers, which we haven't invested in either. The reason why we haven't invested there or in Privacy Sandbox is because it makes up like 0.5% of impressions across all of our clients. So like anytime there's a choice of like, where do I want to focus on better measurement? Is it open web view through, or is it better measuring CTV or better measuring, view through on Snap or Pinterest or TikTok? It's always the latter, never the former.
It always seems to come back to the fact that there's actually, two totally different advertising markets. There's like the top, Fortune 100 customers who are moving from TV and print to digital and have a certain point of view about it. And open web's really important to them. And then there's, everyone else who are, D2C, app install, just all kinds of companies out there who are much more social first, a little bit of open programmatic maybe, but CTV is important.
I think you nailed it. Even the word clean room, right? Like that comes up never in my conversations with clients. And mind you, we work with like some very large e-com retail clients, but it's not that Fortune 100 level. Clean room is not a term that they care about. So yeah, I think you're completely right in that bifurcation.
All right. So Ron, you and I worked together at AppNexus. That's how I got to know you. My time at AppNexus was brief, but I met some great people. So is there an AppNexus mafia, startup mafia?
I'm a firm believer that there is. I mean, we can start to rattle off a couple. We have obviously Beeswax, we have Rockerbox, we have Triple Lift, Sincera. We have
Scope 3.
Scope.
I'm not sure that counts.
That's a little too close to the source, right? There was Ezra's Avoset or Avocat. I forgot how to pronounce that one.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that one.
Able, I forget. Not
Michael Rubenstein's doing a new thing.
Yeah. You have Jen Chen running
Kinetics
and stuff. So yeah, I think there's a definite AppNexus mafia.
Triple Lift. If you had to ask me 10 years ago which of those startups would have the highest exit, I would not have guessed Triple Lift. Probably.
Timing is everything, right?
Is that your bar? You gotta beat Eric and Ari on.
I've been trying to beat Eric and Ari my whole life, and I'm not yet succeeded there, but I'm fingers crossed.
All right.
Also, I think the AppNexus Mafia is split up into two different cohorts. You refer to it as AppNexus or Xander, and that to me is like the telltale sign of which era of AppNexus you're a part of.
Yeah, I don't know anyone who calls it Xander.
I'm with you there.
I call it Microsoft Advertising Technology. All right. On that, let's take a quick break, and we'll come back with the news of the week.
All right, we are back with the news of the week. It was a big news week. We have big fundraising news, big M&A news, big tariff news, some earnings, and maybe a little bit more. But before we do, for some reason, we got a slew of corrections and updates from the listeners. So, Ari, go ahead and correct everything we've said in the past year.
I know. People actually listen to what I say, and I'm wrong like at least 20% of the time, and they like to tell me that. Okay, so we're going to run through corrections. First, I had said on the podcast that Congress's ban of TikTok under PFACA is the name of the act should have been broader, and Adam Klee from Licorice corrects me and says it is broader. In fact, the president can determine that any app that distributes media has over 1 million users and is deemed a threat by the president and is owned by a foreign adversary can be banned. So good for Congress and good for Adam Klee for correcting it. Another listener, I forgot who, but someone reminded me that the VPAA law, which I referred to as the Clarence Thomas law, is actually the Robert Bork law. So I got my Supreme Court justices messed up. But otherwise, I was correct on that point. And finally, this isn't a correction, but more of an enhancement. We talked about the Robinson-Patman Act last week, which is the act that prevents brands from favoring big retailers over small ones and its potential impact on retail media. I want to have a quick call out to James Tenser, who is a retailer guy and writes a blog, and we'll link to it in the newsletter. I had a great conversation with him, and he told me that there's not actually been any enforcement or suits in this area, but people are looking at it because it's sort of a dormant act, and it has been used for other things recently, most recently against Pepsi, and not retail media related, but just pricing related. And so there is some concern among the retail media folk about the Robinson-Patman Act. Okay, so if I put you all to sleep, I apologize, but sometimes we got to just give our readers the call outs on these technical details.
I think given the architectural listenership, this is not at all putting people to sleep. I think we've got such deep, subject matter experts across a lot of things, evidently, that people eat this stuff up. Thank you to the listeners and the readers. Keep correcting Ari. I love it. Anyway, let's go. News of the week. So this one's big. All right. StackAdapt. Prior to this week, how much did you guys think about StackAdapt?
Not much.
It's actually used by my clients, but we'll talk more.
I had good things. Everything I heard was good.
Yeah.
Right.
That was, I think, the general sentiment. Hear good things, got some good people that work there. Apparently this G2 ranks them, the best UI for a DSP. StackAdapt this week announced a $235 million fundraise at a $2.5 billion valuation and has revenue of $500 million. This is a big business. So everybody started talking about this, both sort of publicly and in the DMs. Connor from Luma, shout out. He found an article that points to the fact that it was Indeed, $500 million in net revenue and $125 million in operating profits. And little investor note, a lot of this stuff was secondary, both in this round and the previous round. So this is a big business. This is, for context, higher revenue, if indeed it's apples to apples, 300 million versus 500 million than Viant, a higher market cap than
higher
Viant.
than Trade Desk when it went public. Sorry to jump in.
Yeah, higher than Trade Desk when it went public, and way higher than Hubmatic's valuation, which is 776 million, and it's close to Magnite in terms of market cap. So this is a company that could go public if indeed they wanted to.
Yep.
Give me the reactions, boys.
Yeah, I'll say my initial reaction was, this makes no sense. These numbers make no sense. But then I talk to people. I do a little Twitter DMing and get some background. So the comp here really isn't the Trade Desk. The comp is Basis or Simplify. Yeah. So a lot of smallish, medium-sized regional advertiser or agency clients, very high take rate. One of the things that I like to do is always evaluate DSPs based on their gross spend, because that gives you kind of their relative size. So if you have 500 million in net gross spend, you might say, well, multiply by 5, so that's like 2.5 billion in gross spend. But no, that's not the case. It's probably a lot less. It's probably like 1 to 1.5 billion in gross spend, which would put it in sort of the same category as like Beeswax and Yahoo in terms of size, and probably Basis. I don't really know what Basis's numbers are. So it's big. It's in that, it's like a leader in that sort of second tier of DSPs, but it's much, much, much more profitable than a lot of those other ones because of very high take rates. So overall, really interesting. I think one last point is that if you have very high take rates, you don't really want to go public because people will find out.
A good point. Ron, what you got?
Yeah, I mean, I did a bit of texting as well. People I know in StackAdapt, basically they say it's just easy to run. The Trade Desk has minimums that are relatively high. Not the case with StackAdapt. The quote was like, well, just let me run. And I think that the power of the SMB advertiser is like always underestimated. It's really what made Meta. It's really, I think, what made AdWords. And I think StackAdapt has found a really good big niche.
For sure. I think this is also a testament to, and again, these are public market comps, but like the power of the demand side. You know, you look at Hubmatic, it's a $300 million business with a 776 market cap as of this morning. You know, this is a $500 million business with a $2.5 billion, granted, private valuation. So it just, I think, is a testament to, you know, if you're close to the spend, you've got a lot of optionality to build a valuable business.
Yeah. Also, engineers in Canada are half off because of government subsidies, it's surprising there haven't been more Canadian ad tech companies that have gone global. There are a lot of small ones in Canada that have been, but not as many have made the leap. So that really helps with the operating profit.
Yeah, it's a great point. Okay. Congratulations to StackAdapt. That was awesome. All right. A couple more here. So TVScientific raised a Series B, or long-time investment of ours at the fund. I think this is interesting because if you read the article, and it was kind of buried actually, in Axios, Roku participated in the round. So Roku over the past year has like done, I don't know if it's a 180, but a big turnaround in terms of like being open, having this data cloud, and now working with TVScientific to presumably bring on a lot of performance and SMB advertisers. I thought that was, you know, pretty interesting outside of the fact that, you know, a big Series B is has still been somewhat rare in ad tech. So it checks a lot of boxes in terms of ecosystem momentum. What do you guys think?
I think you're right. It's interesting that Roku is pursuing a diverse strategy. I would say that they both they launched their own performance platform, and now they're investing in someone else's performance platform, and they work with DSPs, and they're doing things to make the DSP channel more effective, like watermarking their data, watermarking their inventory. So I like it. It's not as doctrinaire and rigid as the strategies coming out of, let's say, Amazon for their video business.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to see what comes with OneView, how they invest there versus, how much they're looking to partner with these other DSPs. I haven't heard that much about OneView lately, to be honest, but maybe they're kind of just raising the white flag.
I got the impression OneView was sort of dead-ish. Before they launched their performance program in the fall, in the spring or last winter, it felt like OneView died when they did that deal with the Trade Desk and others.
Yeah, Jason
but I don't know.
Eskenazi came on the pod. He was just, talking about all the, the partnerships and, being, ecosystem friendly. So I think you guys are both right. Cool. We'll move on. This wasn't a funding announcement, but this kind of blew up on AdTech Twitter or AdTech X. Had you guys seen this company Icon prior to this week? Icon.me?
It definitely blew up.
Yeah.
They have a really nice website. They claim a lot of really big brands use the product.
And, kind of fun fact, like Founders Fund, just Peter Thiel's fund that has backed like a bunch of like amazing businesses, doesn't invest in ad tech. They backed these guys at the seed. So they just like publicly launched this week. There was like a cool video from the founder. Seems to be a cool product, but just thought it was kind of interesting from a number of perspectives.
My initial, so they pit, their headline pitch is create 30 ads a month with our AI really easily. And Joe Zapp asked for my take, and I gave sort of my general creative and AI take, which is integration matters more than the AI. But then I actually looked at the product, and it's very oriented towards like vertical video on social, which is an area that probably does not have a lot of investment on the creative side. People just generally just use their phone and create the videos. So if you can make that more efficient, it does seem like kind of a tip of the spear where there may be advertisers who don't have access to the kind of tools other people do and may be really benefited by this. So I think calling it creative is missing some of the nuance about which types of customers, what type of use cases it's automating, and then maybe actually some really beneficial trends in their direction.
The Founders Fund thing is very surprising, though. Like, still, them investing in an ad tech, creative or not, generation company was not on my bingo card for this year.
I'm seeing it like just with, some of the deals that are happening, firms that either I have not heard of or firms that previously where we don't invest in ad tech, they seem to be circling and coming around. One clarification. They say 3-person creative teams make 30 ads per month. With Icon, they can make 300. So I think
Nice.
it's a little bit of, the acceleration piece. The one thing about this stuff is Meta is already offering tools like this. And Meta, in their last earnings report, said they have 4 million clients using generative AI creative tools. So the real question is, if this is geared towards social, is this going to be used by Meta customers, or will they just use the self-serve that is free with Advantage Plus?
It was very oriented towards vertical video and maybe TikTok, Meta, etc.
The biggest thing that always hurt TikTok was creative production. And I would have thought TikTok solves it first, but maybe it is going to be a cross-platform solution.
I think there's also a frequency issue here, which is if you use these systems like TikTok or Instagram Reels, the creative burnout's much faster than it is in a passive environment like TV. As a consumer, you can recognize an ad almost instantly when you've seen it before and skip past it. So more creative is actually a really important thing.
Absolutely. Okay, let's move on to M&A. A couple things to tick through here. So the first thing is Outbrain Teads closed, and the new name is Teads. They've gone with Teads for the company name. They basically had 3 choices. It was call the broader company Outbrain, call the combined company Teads, or come up with a new brand. What do you guys think of the Teads name?
It's not bad. It's good they chose something. Like I just don't waffle. Make a choice. Go with it, but back it. So I give it an endorsement.
I'm thumbs up. I'm pro Teads as a name.
Yeah, I think I'm aligned, right? You think Teads, you think video. The future of the business is clearly video. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Do we know where the name Teads comes from or what it means? Is it short for something? Is it some Britishism or I don't know. What is it?
I don't know, but I bet there is a listener that is furiously typing a correction right now.
It's not a correction. We want info. Tell us where's the name Teads come from?
And answer right now. Please reach out to us. It's a great question. Another deal. Coinbase acquired Spindle. So probably 18 months or so, we had Antonio Garcia Martinez. Awesome episode, by the way. And this was his company. It was attribution for marketing on chain. So the blurb in Coinbase says, by acquiring Spindle's team and technology, we'll be able to help builders go viral on chain and find distribution on Coinbase and across the on-chain economy. What this basically means in terms of my interpretation is Coinbase has the number one app for trading crypto. They also have the number one wallet, the Coinbase wallet for trading crypto. They have an installed base somewhat like Uber in terms of just having millions and hundreds of millions of users using the app, they can build basically a vertical media network for builders, quote unquote, which is effectively trying to get projects out there for people to buy and sell. So I think this is super cool. And there is no better company and no better person to be leading this effort than AGM. So I'm a fan. I know you guys don't care about crypto. Or maybe you do.
Yeah, I was an investor in Spindle. I don't really know what they do, but it's...
oh, congrats.
Yeah, I'm going to get...
Does that make sense now?
Yeah, it's retail media for crypto. I love that. That's great spin on it. I'm going to have to explain to my accountants how I got capital gains in coins. It's going to be great. No, I was an investor actually through Eric Suford's venture capital fund, Heracles, which is an amazing portfolio that he's built.
You got coins?
I think it was paid in coins, or I think it might have been paid in coins.
Fascinating. What's up, Ron? What you got?
I'm a big Antonio fan. I first met him when he was building on FBX, and I think he's the fastest speaker I've met to date with the highest density of things I have no idea what he's talking about, but sound very, very smart per minute. So I'm very, very pro Antonio.
He's a fascinating dude. Chaos Monkeys is an incredible book if you want to learn about ad tech from the previous era. And he's been to Ukraine. He went on Rogan. He is a wild man.
Yeah, he is like a modern day Hunter S in a way.
Absolutely. Shout out to AGM. Final deal. This is a little bit more of a continuation of a trend, but we're touching on Havas acquired a retail media agency called Channel Bakers. I think Havas was the final of the holdcos that didn't make a move in acquiring a commerce or retail media agency, and this is their move. Shout out to Havas. You guys know about Channel Bakers? Never heard of it.
No, I don't. I assume it's an agency that does retail media. Retail media is hard. We had Mark Menino on the pod a couple of months ago, also a great episode where he sort of explained to us what the Flywheel company that had been bought did. And I think that was enlightening because they do stuff besides advertising. They do things like making sure the product pages look right and making sure your reviews are lined up and, all these kind of things that are required to be successful in retail. So I thought that was pretty enlightening.
Yep. Agreed. Another great episode. All right. So here's something going on we got to talk about. So, Ari, can you explain to us what the de minimis exception to tariffs is in a sentence?
Yeah, basically, this is how Temu and their competitors have gotten so big because they ship directly from China, from factories to consumers, and there is a exception to tariff rules if the goods are worth less than $600. And so that's given them a price advantage, a huge price advantage versus products that might be sold more traditionally by being shipped over to a warehouse here in the U.S. and then sent to consumers. And it's generally been seen as a loophole and a bad thing for America that these manufacturers and retailers could skip on them. And so when Trump launched his first salvo in tariffs last week or on Monday, the China tariff, I think, was only 10%, but it included a removal of the de minimis exception. I've read there's been some follow-up coverage of it, which is that, first of all, it definitely affects Temu and those companies. It could effectively put them out of business. One of the follow-on effects is that the U.S. Post Office is not ready to implement this. It's too complicated to implement it, so they're not yet. They're letting it hasn't actually hit the U.S. Postal Service yet. A massive increase in the amount of paperwork you can imagine. And then secondly, that Temu is still shipping from the U.S. where they have goods in the U.S.
Distribution, yeah.
Yeah, it could be that Temu doesn't go out of business. They just start having warehouses in the U.S., which would be probably good for everybody if that changed their business model to be on an even keel with the other competitors.
Awesome explanation. Thank you. There was a good journal piece about this thing. Everybody should read. We'll point to it in the newsletter. It was almost like a thought exercise of, if they actually just like cut off Temu, what are the implications, and then what are the broader implications of the tariffs? Temu is Meta's second largest client with an estimated spend of $2 billion.
Yeah, it's crazy how much money they spend. Also, I guess we'll all be watching out to see their terrible ads on the Super Bowl. Last year, they had like 3 different ad slots with that horrible ad.
But you remembered them.
Fine.
Seventh largest advertiser in the U.S. So again, the thought exercise is, does this have a real impact on the big platforms like Meta and Snap? On the surface, it appears to, but then just given the number of sheer clients, particularly Meta has, you wonder if they can just like suck up all the supply just with increasing, their spend across millions of advertisers. So I don't know if there's like a massive impact on Meta.
There's also another story we have not covered on the pod, but reminds me of, which is Meta changed its rules in the new year for anything health and wellness oriented. Ron's shaking his head, so maybe he has more details. But I believe what they did is they are disallowing email match on anything health and wellness oriented, which is a huge category on Instagram, et cetera. And I've seen all kinds of people freaking out about it, that they're not going to be able to spend.
Yeah, they've made it harder to, exactly that. If you're in health and some financial services, bottom funnel conversions are going to be harder to optimize towards. They don't want to accept all the metadata associated to those conversions. A lot of folks are starting to optimize more towards upper funnel KPIs, landing page visits, things like that. So it's definitely been a bit of an uproar. I think the biggest part was honestly just how it was handled and the speed at which the change was made with kind of no real heads up. And going back to the Timo point, though, my gut says is Meta is fine. I've seen this time and time again. Giant advertiser leaves. They have such a wide roster of advertisers. I feel confident they're going to be able to fill in the lack of demand.
Yeah, in a sense, it's good for other advertisers. So one of the effects of Timo's blast has been to raise rates. And in Meta's earnings, I think they claimed a 14% annual price increase on their inventory, which really hurts advertisers. So removing some pricing pressure is probably good for the marketplace.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so a couple things we'll call it a day. So earnings are rolling in this week. Two things maybe to note. First is Criteo. Slightly dipped in revenue, like 1%, but the stock popped like 20%. And this is Megan Clarken's last earnings call as CEO. So shout out to Megan. A couple of things I picked up. So 225 RMNs are using Criteo. Their agency biz is up 50% year over year. And they seem to have like really good partnerships with Shopify and Meta that I think are boosting investor confidence in Criteo being a sustainable business moving forward under the new CEO.
Yeah, it's a great long-term business transformation. Megan deserves a lot of credit. The new guy will get a lot of credit. I don't know him particularly. I think that it's an interesting company to watch, see what moves they make moving forward.
The Shopify one was interesting for me. They're the only ones who have claimed to be part of this audiences program. I haven't heard much.
Third-party partner. Yeah.
I actually haven't heard much of it from any of my clients or the advertisers there. So it was good press. I'm interested. I want to go dive deeper to see what's actually happening there. But anecdotally, I haven't heard anything there.
Yeah. In the not so good earnings news front, Omnicom made some comments around what they anticipate the cost savings to be from the acquisition of IPG, and they're expecting $750 million in cost savings. And the line was client-facing and revenue-generating roles will generally be protected, but back office and operations are likely going to be targeted with some layoffs. So that's what happens sometimes with these big mergers.
Not unexpected, right?
Yeah, not unexpected at all. That's how they make these things work economically, at least from a corporate perspective. Anything else, guys? You want to call it a day?
Let's give Steve Yap a big congratulations for finally leaving Google. So I'll call him friend of the pod. I think we made fun of him once. He's a friend of mine personally, and he's been at Google for 20 years or something.
Yeah.
So he's now the CRO of Perion.
Yeah, congrats to Steve and congrats to Perion. Sounds like you got a great leader there.
All right. Well, it was a great episode. Ron, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom about measurement. Next time you come on, I'll also forget you've ever been on, and I'll welcome you for the first time.
I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Ari. Thank you, Ron. We'll see you next week, everybody.
Thank you for subscribing to Marketecture. New interviews are added every week at marketecture.tv and your favorite podcasting app.
Thank you for listening to the Marketecture podcast. New episodes come out every Friday, and an insightful vendor interview is published each Monday. You can subscribe to our library of hundreds of executive interviews at marketecture.tv. You can also sign up for free for our weekly newsletter with my original strategic insights on the week's news at news.marketecture.tv. And if you're feeling social, we operate a vibrant Slack community that you can apply to join at adtechgod.com.